Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to America Now. I'm Barb Adams, and I'll be live with you all 3 hours tonight. Thanks so much for listening. Well, I've got a great show lined up, including a discussion on the 2016 budget in Hour 1, followed by how to rewire your brain for stronger, healthier relationships in Hour 2. Then in Hour 3, we'll learn about Sky People in Mesoamerica. And be sure to listen throughout the show tonight for great tips on studying for the workforce from author and startup advisor Ken Goldstein. I hope you stay for the entire show, but if you do miss any part, you can listen to this or any of my shows in their entirety on my website, radioamericanow.com, under archives. Well, this week, President Obama unveiled the 2016 budget for America. While less an exercise in accountancy than political showmanship, the budget does present a lengthy financial list to Congress. Joining me now is author and former statewide prosecutor and Deputy Attorney General of New Jersey, John J. Higgins. Together we form the nonpartisan Practical Solutions for America and ask you join us here on air and on our new Facebook page to work together to find common ground in discussing and solving the challenges in present-day American society, government, and politics. If you'd like to join tonight's discussion, the number to call, 800-259-5791. Again, that's 800-259-5791. John, welcome back. How you doing?
Good, Barb. Always nice talking to you.
Yeah, good to talk with you, too. I've got a little frog in my throat right now, so let's hope he goes away here. John, the budget, it contains a lot of initiatives that should be very popular with the American people, especially those attempts to ease the burden on the middle class. All sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Well, it sounds good, but I'm not so sure that it accomplishes what anyone would intend for it to really accomplish. Yeah. What the president is proposing to help the middle class are these earned income credits and $500 additional deduction or credit that someone will get for being a second earner in the family seems a little bit anemic for what's going on in the economy, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially when you consider what they keep saying is non-inflation out there, but seems to be running about 20-some% right now. I don't know about you. Every time I go to the store, it just keeps costing more and more for less and less. And $500, sure, it helps, but that's almost 1 or 2 trips to the store for most families.
Oh, absolutely. And like you say, every time you go to the store, the costs have gone up, and the amount of product you get is less. So I think that it's really well-intentioned that the focus now, at least the discussion, is starting to come towards the middle class. But, we need Congress and the president, to be focused more in infusing more money into the middle class and protecting the middle class from a lot of things as opposed to what they've been doing pretty much for the last 40 or 50 years has been protecting the corporations and the higher classes.
Yeah, exactly, and they've been gutting the middle class. It has been a war on the middle class, and many of the middle class right now are just barely hanging on, falling into the lower class. And, what I thought, though, was interesting, too, was the White House's definition of middle class. Because in certain things, some of those funds, the extra funds allotted to the Earned Income Tax Credit, Head Start, the colleges and the Pell Grants, would all be directed at the households in the bottom half of the income distribution. But, regardless of income, looks like all families would then be eligible for that second earner tax credit, that $500. But then families who earn up to, $120,000 a year would be eligible for the tax credits tied to the child care. Well, in my opinion, $120,000 these days, depending on where you live, wow, middle class, really?
Yeah. No, and part of the problem that happens when they're doing these discussions on a national basis is that, there are wide disparities in terms of the incomes in various states. A lot of the southern states, the ones who want to secede all the time generally, they get a hell of a lot more money back from the federal government than they ever put in. States like I'm in, like New Jersey or whatever, we get very little back from what goes into the federal government because our cost of livings are so high up here. And I would think that where you are, the same. You're starting to get up into our category.
Yeah. We don't have the taxation as far as like, the housing taxes and those kinds of things yet. But with the continuing masses of people moving here to Colorado, things are changing very, very rapidly. So, yeah, we're getting up there, too.
Yeah, and, like in a state like mine, we're taxed 16 different ways to Sunday. Property taxes, because our school systems are, I don't know, we have home rule, so it gets a little crazy. But, there's some, towns where people are paying up to like $30,000 a year in property taxes, which is absolutely insane.
Wow. For a lot of people, that's a year's income. That's awful.
It's a mortgage.
Yeah.
And that's why at some point, I think that if you really want to help the middle class, you have to come up with a reasoned and total, type of approach that deals with all of the issues, not this piecemeal, a tax credit here or whatever. I don't know when you were reading the stuff of the budget. When I read it, it's like you've got to be an accountant. You get a headache after looking at it for a short period of time, trying to figure out what they're all talking about doing. And by the time you're done looking at it all, you're going, well, yeah, but what are you really giving anybody?
Exactly. Yeah, all we really want to know is how is it going to benefit us? And to be able to try to read through this, and I'm sure, like you said, you're at least a lawyer. You can look at it from that angle. I look at it as just a lay person going, wow, what does this totally mean? I kind of did an overview and looked at the spending and the taxes and certain things that are being hit, but it's like it almost seems right now kind of late. Too little, too late.
Right. It would be like putting a Band-Aid on a patient that's having a heart attack. Yeah. And part of the problem is, and I think this is part of what's going on even with the American public, is that they're not aware that we are in heart failure, that it isn't a Band-Aid issue any longer, that we're starting to pay the cost for all of these policies that have failed for decades. And no one is really addressing it that way. They're like, well, if we give you another $500, or, if your child care credit, we'll give you another $3,000. I don't know where $3,000, how far that would go for having your child taken care of, at least around here generally, is it sucks up the entire second earner's income. And, these are issues that are really putting everyone at risk. Because without a middle class, there really are no other classes.
Exactly. When we go, everybody goes, including those at the top that are sucking off us.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, they go first pretty much because they won't be able to hold on to their wealth. And, that's why, I don't know where all the economists are that aren't really crying out about this. I mean, it's the middle class that spends money. It's the middle class that earns money. It's the middle class that is really the engine in any capitalistic society. Study history again. Anytime the middle class is dying or dead, there's where revolution goes. France wouldn't have gone to a revolution if the middle class was healthy in the 1780s, nor would Russia in the 1900s. But as soon as that happens, or China, it comes later. I mean, all of these countries are at risk as soon as that middle class is gone.
Yeah, all right. We'll continue this discussion on the 2016 budget here on America Now after the break. All right, I am back from Venus, and I'm here with you now on America Now. And my discussion this evening is on the budget, the 2016 budget, and I'm talking with John Higgins. And John, 6 out of 10 Americans believe that wealthy individuals and corporations don't pay their fair share in taxes. I mean, I think probably it's higher than that. That's according to Gallup. I think it's probably 9 out of 10 at this point. But it looks like at least some of the proposals are going to be working to try to get that a little more down, where they start paying a little bit more taxes, especially by taxing the company's overseas profits. What do you think about that one?
Oh, absolutely. It has gotten so unfair in terms of tax burden that, the middle class has been funding this engine as best as it can for all of these years, and now it's finally sputtering. The whole trickle-down economics theory basically was a failure. and we keep recycling back, thinking that we've got to go back into this trickle-down thing. The people who have a lot of money, they hold on to the money. They put it into the stock market. Money in the stock market really doesn't give the companies any more money. It's gambling on what their stock is worth. So they may or may not create more jobs. They get hung up on what the value of the stock is. So that becomes to me, it's like a false message. The same thing with these corporations. I just read something that Apple has something like $178 billion in excess profits they do not know what to do with. If they paid off all their debt, it'd be another $35 billion out of it. It would leave them $142 billion. Now, you can sit there and say, okay, these people, they went out and they earned it and they had a good product and they did all of that. Well, part of it is people committing suicide in China manufacturing the stuff, which is going to come back to bite somebody someday. And also, they rely on the U.S. military. We say that it's to protect our interests abroad. I don't know about you or I really have no interest in any property in China or Iraq or Afghanistan or, in Egypt or any of those things. It's not my property we're defending.
Yeah, exactly. And when you start talking about that, you get into the foreign aid, and you look at all the money we're spending that way. Just last year, we sent, $35 million to Russia, $590 million to Pakistan, Iraq, $135 million, Syria, $190 million, Afghanistan, $1 billion. That's a lot of money, and it goes on and on and on.
Yes, and this is the defense you get from them spending it. They go, well, it's only 1% of what we're doing in the budget, but it's 1% of our money. And when you're talking about billions of dollars, and it's not for a single year, it's year in and year out. I mean, nobody seems to have a real handle on what this is. And I guess the thing that personally kind of infuriates me is that when it comes to, spending money to help people in our country or to do something that for our infrastructure or whatever, we're broke. However, if it talks about spending money overseas for some project or we destroyed the infrastructure of Iraq and we rebuilt it, and that didn't do anything for our infrastructure.
Yeah, but there is a plan. There's a proposal for our infrastructure. We're going to be taking, a 14% one-time tax on the accumulated foreign earnings of U.S. corporations, and currently those corporations are subject to U.S. taxes when their earnings are repatriated to the United States, but then repatriated, key word.
Well, on top of it, I don't know about you, but, to me, if you're an American, that should be one of the duties that you're proud to do. I mean, a corporation can't go out and do work. It can't do what a normal citizen does, despite what the Supreme Court may think. And part of to me, it's just patriotic that you should be doing your fair share. I don't know where it turned. I mean, I always quote Kennedy. I mean, I loved what he used to say. It's don't ask what the country can do for you. It's what you can do for your country. It's like we are in an American experiment, and this is a fragile thing in the world. And if you're not willing to stand up and do the right thing, then you don't belong here. I don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, it looks like, some of these proposals, too, at least they're going to be closing some of those trust fund loopholes as well on some of this for the wealthy taxpayers, and that I'm assuming those are the people also with the corporations.
And again, and that was also technical. They're talking about changing the stepped-up basis. Now, I don't know how many people understand what a stepped-up basis is. I mean, we have gotten everything so complex that it's all doublespeak, so that, people don't understand what these things really are. So how can you object if you don't agree with it, Yeah. And this whole idea with stepped-up basis and all of this, these were all tax benefits for people when they passed on whatever they accumulated in their lifetime. Generally, that shouldn't have been a problem, but what's happened is it's gone so excessive that it's become kiltered again, where, there's so much wealth that's getting passed without tax. And, And so we've got to start straightening that out someplace, because, again, otherwise the middle class is going to be gone. And the thing that kind of irks me with this idea that we're going to do some kind of amnesty to get them to bring the money back, why would they all of a sudden comply if they haven't been doing it all along?
Yeah, and again, who's really calling the shots here?
Right. I've used the example. It's like a guy holds up a bank and he runs with the $50,000. And it's like, well, I'll come back and I'll give you $45,000 back, or I'll give you $25,000 back if you don't arrest me.
Hey, sounds like a pretty good deal, right?
Right, exactly. It's like, we shouldn't even be having this discussion to begin with.
But we are, and we've been allowing this, and it's not just, and it's not just recent. This has been ongoing, as you're talking about, for decades. Reagan himself overspent the entire time he was in government. And as you said, Bush continued that trickle down. And Clinton tried to move in the direction of balancing the budget, but Bush II distributed whatever surplus we had. And it went to the wealthy, not to the middle class.
Well, I think most of the workers, because I think I might have gotten $2 back a week, which was meaningless. It's like, what, keep the money and do something productive with it. But it's the wealthy that ended up with the big chunks of money. And then when you look in the comparative tax rates on corporations, I mean, in the Eisenhower realm, it's someplace around 40%. They're complaining now in real dollars, it's only 20%. So they keep touting these numbers. Well, it's 35% and whatever. I mean, their goal is not to be taxed at all. I mean, at some point you got to get real and understand what their real message is.
That's exactly what we're talking about. We've got a royalty class building, and the rest of us are all going to be at the bottom. All right, America Now continues after the break. Stay with us. All right, everybody, and I'm being joined by John J. Higgins, and we're discussing the 2016 budget. There was a response by the Republicans, John, and as usual, it stays focused on the need to balance the budget. I mean, come on. Why don't we all just tighten our belts, We've got to do this. We've got to live within our means, don't we?
Well, of course, that's the mantra that we get from them all the time. We don't get any real proposals on how to help the middle class. Their main claim to fame and the argument they use all the time is that it's the governmental debt that is weighing us down. Well, when I look at it, I don't know that it's the debt that's really affecting the middle class per se. We don't get any return for the money that we're putting in, basically, where the money's all going up into the upper echelons or to corporations. They're not holding them accountable for all of that, and therefore this whole mantra of the weight, stopping the economy, it certainly hasn't stopped corporate profits. It certainly hasn't stopped the stock market. It certainly hasn't stopped, the standard of living for the wealthy. All it has done is affected the middle class more so than even the poor class, and it stops the government from doing what it normally should do in these circumstances and prime the pump, infuse money into the economy, rebuild the infrastructure, put the people who are unemployed back to work in jobs that are somewhat equivalent to what their skill set is. Not everybody should go from being a middle manager or whatever in a middle class job to be flipping hamburgers.
Yeah,
this is
and we've got a lot of that.
Yeah, this is not the approach. And I was kind of impressed with the Gallup, organization. I'd read something that, they're claiming that the whole thing about the unemployment rate is bogus. We're not counting the people who've given up and they can't find a job and are no longer on the rolls. Someplace along the line, we stopped counting them in terms of the national statistics, which is insanity to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, everything's improving. There are more people, employed these days. Well, maybe, but again, how are they being employed? Like you're talking about flipping hamburgers, service jobs. You'd have to work 24/7 7 at today's minimum wages, even with the minimum wage increases, to be able to just survive, let alone try to feed a family. You can't do it. And there's a lot of people in those categories, and as you mentioned, John, so many people have fallen off the unemployment rolls because, one, they have quit looking. They've given up. And two, their benefits run out, so they don't qualify to be listed that way anymore either. And these people are all hungry. They want jobs, but they want real jobs. We need to be creating real jobs.
And the big ruse is that, they're not trained for the right jobs. Well, I don't know. When I went to college, you could use a liberal arts degree to do any kind of mid-level management kind of thing. Most jobs that I was ever in, and I worked in industry and some pretty skilled things, I learned while I was there. It was not something particularly complex. What's happened is that they've allowed the corporations to move these jobs overseas where they're not paying anyone, anywhere near what we would need in this country to survive. Right. And therefore, they get higher profits and all of that. But it's really so short-sighted because when we can't buy their product, no one will buy it. There won't be anything that's being sold, and then it's when it starts collapsing.
It becomes that downward spiral, and a lot of those profits, we need to put it back in education. I think a good proportion of Americans really understand that we really need to improve the educational system. That needs to be a top priority.
Right. But what I'm afraid of, because many of my friends who, they've lost their jobs or whatever, they're going into healthcare, so they're learning to be nurses and all of that. You keep pumping everybody just into the healthcare field, and you're going to have a glut of employees in that end. We need to be thinking on bigger scales and creating jobs. We need to go into the inner cities and fix the problem. Yeah. The crime rate is being a prosecutor. It isn't that it's racial, it's poverty. When people don't have anything, they break the law. That's what happens. And we keep stopping, the money from going in to do these fixes. I saw some CNBC, article or interview of this CEO from some semiconductor program. And he's going, creating jobs in the government is absolutely a waste and it's worthless and whatever. And his reasoning is, and I don't know where he got these numbers. He says the Congressional Budget Office that it costs $1 million to create a governmental job.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I worked in government. Trust me. It was never $1 million to create that job. And then he says that to do a small business job, it costs $30,000 to create a small business job. And I'm like, well, I don't know where you could possibly be getting those numbers, but if you're part of a big corporation, I don't know that number is going to apply. And we've discussed this before. The mom and pop businesses are dead. They're killed off now by these major corporations. Yeah. So how can they come up and survive?
Yeah. How are they supposed to compete against the Lowe's, the big corps out there, the Home Depots, and all of these Walmarts and all of that? And I'm not against the big box. It's nice because we're being forced that we need to save our pennies, so we're being forced to go to the big boxes because they can sell for less. But again, this is that downward spiral because it puts the small business owner out of business. Yes. That's you and me and my neighbors and your neighbors and
And we said this before as well, is that the corporations were never the model that the founding fathers were looking at. They had no use for corporations. They did not trust them, and they didn't trust them for a variety of reasons. Was that they could get too big, they could control too much, they could control too much of government, and they had the taste in their mouth from having dealt with the corporations from England. So now we've got corporations that make them look like they were amateurs.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's very true. But again, we've got an opportunity for reform right now. If people would start speaking up, that's what we need to do. We need, at the grassroots level, to start saying, wait a minute. This is topsy-turvy. It's time to take back the power.
Absolutely, because you can't be elected unless you get the votes. And we hold the votes. And the elected officials, for whatever reason, I think they seem to be losing that as well, is they are our servants. They are not our masters.
Yeah. Try to remind them of that. Yeah, and more importantly, they're not in there for their lifetime, for the pension. This isn't a career position. That's what gets me. It's service. It's all about service. Servants.
Yes, and the other thing, we need to start examining what laws they're passing for their own benefit. This has got to stop. They're not subject to all the laws that we're subjected to.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but it was in Oklahoma or something that there was a bill going through the legislature that it was going to forbid prosecutors from going after any elected official in the state.
Yeah.
So they're going to be in a whole separate class that they can't be prosecuted for wrongdoing.
Yeah. They're above it. They're above all of us. That's really getting scary when we start looking at it that way. We cannot let this happen. Not in this country. As you say, this is an experiment, but let's not let this experiment go way out of hand this far.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, until we start saying, and couch it in the right terms, because they keep trying to befuddle everyone. And if you don't know how to argue back, then you don't stand a chance.
Yep, unfortunately. Hopefully we're not at that point, but we're close. We're close, John. All right, we'll continue this discussion after the break. All right, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to America Now. I'm joined by John J. Higgins. We're discussing Obama's 2016 budget. And, John, there's a lot of things that were in there. There's a large laundry list that was included in there. And a lot of it sounds good, as we've been talking about. But, there's also a lot that really wasn't in there that needs to be included. And, we talked a little bit about education, but, things like Social Security, Medicare, health care, climate change, all these kind of things, they need to be addressed.
Absolutely. And there doesn't seem to be any commitment by the government to shore up these systems that really need to be shored up. I hate the word entitlement. In terms of law, entitlement is that you and I have a contract. You do your part, and then I am entitled, or you are entitled, for me to do my part. It's not some freebie. These programs are part of the contract of America. And, if we don't take care of one another, or you do your part of the contract, and then they're going to renege on it, I mean, that is that's fraud.
Yeah.
Somebody should be going to prison as far as I'm concerned. That is not the stuff that's acceptable.
Yeah. When you're talking about entitlement, the budget request doesn't really include any meaningful plans to reform spending, especially, again, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. There's $400 billion in health savings, but a large part of that savings is going to come from cuts to providers and increased drug costs. And guess who's going to end up paying there? That's not reform.
Well, if you just take Medicare, I mean, when it was first in place, it was supposed to cover the elderly, right? Now you have to have a Part A and a Part B, or whatever the parts are. So now you have to pay for supplemental insurance to get coverage for, doctors and all of those other things. This stuff shouldn't. We have enough money in this country for what we do that should not be a problem. If we can put a man on the moon, we can certainly figure out how to get the funding right where no one in this country is hungry, they don't have a house, they don't have health care. I mean, Obamacare, I'm not against it, because I do think we needed universal health care, because we did have universal health care whether people liked it or not. It was just the costliest levels, because when somebody went to an emergency room, they had to cover them, and it really wasn't very effective. But this whole thing of having privatized corporations as the middleman in it, where they're making profits, certain things, as soon as the government is involved and makes a corporation or a company as one of its agents, as far as I'm concerned, it is a part of government. So if they mandate, in New Jersey we mandate auto insurance, those companies should not be allowed to be operating at a for-profit thing, because it's a law, it's a mandate. The same thing with the healthcare companies. They can run themselves they have no shortage of customers now. They get penalized if they don't. So the CEOs, there's no risks involved. As far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't get paid anything more than any state's governor. So in $150,000, $175,000 range.
Oh, yeah, wow. Would that be a cut for them at this point? Yikes. And on top of it, they're the ones, as you said, and as we all know, they're the ones getting to write the rules on all of this now, controlling it all. This is not right.
And why is that? Because they pay the politicians and give them contributions.
Yep, here we go, legalized bribery again.
Right, it goes right back to the legalized bribery. And the thing is that as when they get a lot more money, so do the politicians get much more money into their campaign coffers. So it's all intricately tied together. And, healthcare is such an important thing for everyone. Like, we're not a third world country. And the doctors, they should be able to make a decent living. That's a very hard profession to get into.
Yes.
It's not, and certainly I would hope no Tom, Dick, and Harry was my doctor. I want a guy who's specially trained for all of that. But the people who should be making the money of that are the doctors and the healthcare providers and not the insurance companies.
Yeah, exactly. And the insurance companies now are dictating so much to the doctors. And Big Pharma. Big Pharma's out there, too. They've got a stranglehold on the whole system, the whole healthcare system right now.
Well, and the funniest thing is, if they really don't have enough money, then it would probably remove 90% of the ads on television. The same thing with the insurance companies. If they were broke and not with all this money, I don't know what other commercials would be on. I don't know when you watch TV. I see that woman from Progressive, 50,000 times. Geico, I like the little newt, but he's at least amusing. And then there's drugs that, take Abilify, and then 20 seconds of how it deals with depression, and then 50 seconds of what's going to fall off on your body.
Exactly. Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? And you're right. Most of the commercials are geared towards, you're right, especially the pharmaceuticals and then the insurance, suing about the pharmaceuticals. If you took these and suffered from these, that's exactly what they've got their things going here.
You'll see an ad for Xarelto, and 20 minutes later you'll see 1-800-BAD-DRUG.
Exactly.
Which if it wasn't affecting our economy, it would be funny and a comedy in itself. Unfortunately, it's not.
Tragic comedy, unfortunately, because most all of us are affected by this. So, John, how do we wrangle this around again? How do we take back our power? Again, we want people starting to discuss this. This is why we're doing this. We're doing this on air. And go to our Facebook page, Practical Solutions for America. Come on, America. We want people talking. We want your ideas. We've got to get some better ideas. We're Americans. We have great ideas usually. Probably a lot better, and obviously a lot better than the people who have gotten us into the situation we're in now. Let's start talking about this.
Yes, and I think we've almost got to go back to the basics, grassroots things. People can get on a ballot by getting a certain number of signatures. You don't really need a political party to be able to do that. So it may be time that we start forming some other kind of party where it really relies on votes and pledges of the people running that they're not going to take money from campaigns and that they're going to go in and serve, pursuant to some kind of term limit. And it's not going to be a job for life.
Yeah. And speaking of jobs for life, pensions. There's another thing we didn't really discuss tonight. National pensions. Things along those lines. Most people these days, I know your thing is the 401k.
Well, I've always thought that as soon as I saw that, I thought it was the biggest scam that was ever pulled on the American public. You're supposed to take money, put it into a sanctioned or like an escrow account that Wall Street gets to play with, churn it, charge fees for every time they do a transaction, and then your money is locked in there. So if it grows, if you're lucky it grows, because the management fees don't eat it up, and then if you really need the money and you go to pull it out, you're clobbered with all kinds of fines and penalties and whatever. That's your money.
Yeah. Yeah, we forget this, too. You know, we've bought into the system and allowed this to happen to us. We have given our power away, and it's not right what's happening to us. And less than not being right is the situation we're in now, the dying middle class. That means we're all going, and we keep trying to emphasize that, you know, but we can't emphasize it enough.
Well, and you think, too, the other thing that's really coming to all the generations that are moving towards retirement, and you could be 40 years from now moving in that direction, is that if your retirement funds or Social Security are not capable of keeping up with the inflation rate, you won't have what you think you're going to have. Yeah. And this goes back to the 401ks when it totally relies on the stock market. When the stock market does a blip because of a bubble, your money can basically disappear, and lo and behold, or woe upon you, if it's around the time that you're retiring.
Oh, yeah. And these days, retiring has a whole different meaning. I mean, people are lucky if they get to stay in a job that they can retire at. Usually when you get to that point, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we need to let you go at this point.
Oh, yeah. Well, I saw that in the early 70s when I first started working for a major corporation, and they had taken over a plant from a company that was a subsidiaries of theirs. Anyone who had 20 to 25 years, they were getting close to retirement, they went in and they fired them. So they just ended the problem. And that was in the early 70s when I thought there were still some controls. Today there are no controls.
Yeah, we're sitting in a pickle. All right. Please join John and I again on air each week as we discuss these challenges for America, and go to our Facebook page, Practical Solutions for America. We want to hear your thoughts.